There's a product in your bathroom right now that the peer-reviewed dental literature increasingly suggests you do not need. You bought it because it burns, and burning feels like proof. You kept buying it because your gums kept bleeding, which felt like confirmation that without it things would be worse. But here's the question nobody in the oral care aisle ever asks out loud. What if the burning and the bleeding are connected, not as problem and solution, but as cause and effect? The practice that may replace it costs $2 a month. It has been validated in multiple independent clinical trials across 3 continents. It requires nothing you cannot find at any grocery store before noon today. And the reason you have never heard about it from your dentist has less to do with science and more to do with what gets a marketing budget and what does not. That gap between what the research says and what ends up in your shopping cart is the exact kind of story NexReveal was built to tell. Start with what your mouth actually is. The framework most of us carry treats the oral cavity as a contamination zone, something to be periodically sterilized, something whose natural state is a problem waiting to happen. That framework built a $2 billion annual industry in the United States alone. It is also incomplete in ways that carry real consequences. The human mouth hosts somewhere between 500 and 700 distinct bacterial species. The majority are either neutral or actively beneficial. Among the most critical are the nitrate-reducing bacteria on the back of the tongue, organisms that convert dietary nitrates from vegetables into nitrite, which the body then converts into nitric oxide, the signaling molecule your blood vessel walls use to regulate pressure and arterial flexibility. A 2019 study published in Free Radical Biology and Medicine tracked adults who used antiseptic mouthwash twice daily for 1 week. Their systolic blood pressure rose measurably, not from stress, not from diet, from the elimination of the oral bacteria responsible for initiating that conversion pathway. The mouthwash worked exactly as designed. That was the problem. Here is where the story becomes something different than a warning label, because what replaces it has a history that runs back over 3,000 years. The Ayurvedic medical tradition documented a practice called Kavala Graha, oil swishing, in texts estimated to predate the Common Era. The Karaka Samhita describes it as a treatment for oral disease, halitosis, and several systemic conditions. Independently, European folk medicine traditions carried a similar practice across the Atlantic in the 18th century. Different name, different cultural context, same fundamental principle. Unrefined oil, held in the mouth and moved slowly through the teeth for an extended period, produced measurable improvements in gum tissue that no other available remedy matched. Subscribe to NexReveal now if you want to keep receiving the research that the industry's advertising budget is designed to bury. Because what comes next is where the modern science catches up to what those traditions already knew. The mechanism begins with a molecule called lauric acid. Lauric acid makes up roughly 45 to 53% of the fatty acid content in unrefined virgin coconut oil. It is the same compound responsible for the antimicrobial properties of human breast milk, a fact studied in neonatal immunology research since the 1960s. When lauric acid contacts the lipid bilayer membrane of gram-positive bacteria like Streptococcus mutans, the organism most responsible for the acid erosion that causes cavities and drives gum recession, it destabilizes that membrane and pulls the bacteria away from the surfaces where it anchors. The mechanism differs fundamentally from how antiseptic mouthwash functions. Mouthwash floods a surface. The oil, because of its lipid solubility, interacts directly with the structural chemistry of the biofilm, the adhesive microbial matrix coating your teeth that your toothbrush disrupts mechanically on surfaces it can reach but cannot penetrate. This distinction is why the clinical outcomes look the way they do. A 2008 randomized controlled trial by Asokan and colleagues, published in the Indian Journal of Dental Research, found that 20 minutes of daily oil pulling produced a statistically significant reduction in salivary Streptococcus mutans counts, comparable to chlorhexidine mouthwash, the prescription-strength antiseptic considered the clinical benchmark for bacterial reduction. The same research group published confirming results in 2009 and 2011. In 2016, Kaushik and colleagues published a direct head-to-head comparison in the Journal of Contemporary Dental Practice. Coconut oil pulling versus chlorhexidine over 2 weeks. Statistically equivalent reductions in bacterial counts. No brown enamel staining. No altered taste perception. No disruption to the broader oral microbiome. In 2022, a meta-analysis in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health pooled data across multiple oil pulling trials and confirmed significant reductions in plaque index, gingival index, and bleeding on probing. That last measurement, bleeding on probing, is what your hygienist records when she presses a calibrated instrument to your gum line and marks whether the tissue bleeds. It is one of the earliest clinical indicators of active periodontal disease progression. The practice moved that number consistently across multiple independent study populations. Most people stop there. They hear that it works and they file it away as interesting. But the part that actually determines whether you see results is not whether you do it. It is when. While you sleep, salivary flow drops significantly as part of normal autonomic physiology. Without saliva mechanically washing your oral surfaces and delivering its antimicrobial proteins, bacterial colonies on your teeth, tongue, and gum line go undisturbed for 6 to 8 hours. The biofilm softens slightly. Streptococcus mutans accumulates to its overnight peak. The bacteria are, in a measurable sense, most accessible and most vulnerable within a specific window after waking. The Kaushik 2016 trial included a methodology detail most summaries ignore. Participants who performed oil pulling within 15 to 20 minutes of waking, before consuming any food or liquid, showed the strongest reductions in bacterial counts. Both the Ayurvedic tradition and the European folk tradition independently specified the morning before eating as the correct window. They preserved that instruction because it produced better outcomes. The cellular biology that explains why came 3,000 years later. This is the point where NexReveal subscribers typically say they wish they had found this channel earlier. If someone in your life has been dealing with gum recession or persistent bleeding that dentist visits alone have not resolved, share this video before the end of the day. The execution is simple, but the details determine the result. Use unrefined, cold-pressed virgin coconut oil, not refined coconut oil, which has been processed in ways that reduce its lauric acid content. 1 level tablespoon is the clinical dose used across the trials referenced here. Take it before anything else enters your mouth in the morning, before water, before toothpaste, before coffee. Let it melt on your tongue, which takes roughly 10 to 15 seconds at body temperature. Then begin moving it slowly and deliberately through the teeth, along the gum line, under the tongue. Not vigorous rinsing. Slow, consistent movement that allows the oil to contact every surface. 20 minutes is the target. If you are starting for the first time, begin at 5 minutes and add 2 to 3 minutes each day. Most people integrate the practice into an existing morning routine. Getting dressed, reading, making breakfast, and find the time disappears without effort. By the end of those 20 minutes, the oil will have emulsified with saliva and turned opaque white, significantly increased in volume. Expel it into a waste bin, not a sink drain. Coconut oil returns to solid form below 24 degrees Celsius and will accumulate in cold pipes over time. Rinse thoroughly with warm water. Follow with light brushing using a soft bristle brush. Many practitioners add a small amount of baking soda at this stage for its mild alkalizing effect, which neutralizes the acidic conditions that pathogenic bacteria favor. The entire routine adds no additional time to your morning if you are already brushing. The clinical timeline follows a documented pattern. Gingival bleeding during flossing decreases within the first week for most users as acute inflammation begins to resolve. Visible plaque reduction appears within 2 to 3 weeks. Pocket depth measurements, the millimeter readings your dentist records at checkups, begin to improve within 30 days of consistent daily practice in people with existing mild to moderate gum disease. Go to your next dental appointment without telling your hygienist what you changed. Listen to what the numbers say. There's one final layer. The 2017 paper in BMJ Open Diabetes Research and Care followed adults over 3 years and found that individuals using antibacterial mouthwash more than twice daily had a significantly higher incidence of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes than those who did not. The proposed mechanism was impaired nitric oxide production from the destruction of nitrate-reducing oral bacteria, the same pathway discussed at the beginning of this video. The researchers noted the need for further investigation on confounding variables, but the association was statistically significant, and it connects oral hygiene practice to metabolic and cardiovascular function in ways that a sterilization-focused framework cannot account for. The mouth is not a contamination zone. It is an ecosystem. What lives there and in what balance has consequences that extend far beyond your next dental cleaning. The practice described in this video costs $2 a month, is supported by over 15 years of peer-reviewed clinical evidence, and requires nothing you do not already have access to. Put a jar of unrefined coconut oil on your nightstand tonight. Tomorrow morning, 1 tablespoon before anything else, 20 minutes, spit into the trash, rinse, brush. Do it every day for 30 days. The gum tissue you thought was just aging may simply have been waiting for the right chemistry.